Welcome to today's episode of the AI Trailblazer podcast. Today we have Dwayne, who is the founder and CEO of Rutabaga App, and he will be sharing us more about the journey he's been having so far while building this company, as well as any broader industry trends that he might be seeing as well. So before we start off, we are Convert Inbox and we partner with B2B software companies to grow their business and revenue. So if you want to take your B2B software company to the next level, make sure to stick around and drop us the word growth in the DMs below if you want a free growth consultation as well. Without further ado, we have Dwayne here. It is a pleasure to have you on today, Dwayne. So maybe let's start off with sort of your journey as well as why you chose to build this company and then how your role fits into the bigger picture at Rutabaga App as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it probably starts. I founded a consultancy back in 2005 that was a design strategy consultancy, and we really focused on enterprise. Which meant we were a smaller consultancy, and so it was difficult to get in, because procurement teams didn't like having small consultancies in. So when we would get in, we would land and expand. So whenever we would get a new logo, it meant we'd get several clients. And the number of times that I'd be in there and see that a customer would ask us, like, hey, how much would it cost for you to help us solve for something? And the answer would be, well, nothing, because we just did this for another group last quarter for a group here in this organization. And this would happen over and over and over again. And that kind of set the tone, or kind of planted the seed for what we're doing now. And thinking, like, these companies are doing all this strategic work and they don't know it. They're not sharing it. There's no way to like see it across the enterprise. And if there was a way to
Mm.
consolidate this and make it shareable and more usable, that they could be saving money and saving time too. And so from there, I had that consultancy up until about 2016, when I took a step away from it, and one of my co-founders now took over management of it, and ended up going in-house. I got recruited by Cisco, or not, sorry, not Cisco, Salesforce, to build out a team. Uh, from there, I was at Salesforce for about half a decade and was in Iron Mountain and ServiceNow, was kind of my corporate journey. And there I started to see how often you would be on the wrong path and get data that showed you were on the wrong path, but then go back to doing the same things that you were doing. And so then I started developing techniques to get people to use the data, go on the right path. And that's when I started thinking about, like, in addition to getting all the data in the right spot to inform people, how could we start to take what the techniques I'm using to get people to use data on an analog, non-scalable way and make that digital and make it scalable. And that's really where Rutabaga came from. Is like, how do we consolidate it, data, number one, and then make it leverageable, where we can start to help people leverage it to change their pathway and how they can change their strategies around, like, products and marketing and the like. And that's really kind of how, kind of combining my path and how Rutabaga came to be.
Okay. Is there any specific industry that you focus on? Because I understand you mentioned you want to transform how data is being used for, different purposes.
Yeah, right now it's not. We're really just focused on the problem of consolidating customer insights and using those to make decisions. We're in a soft launch right now, and some of the customers that we have on, they range in size from like small, kind of like maybe like Series B startups, all the way up to really large enterprises. And companies include things like banks, sneaker companies, headphone companies, and then like software companies include like electronic medical records companies, B2B sales tools. Like, it runs the gamut. And one of the things we're doing in the soft launch is to really understand how the different groups are using our platform, to start to understand if any of them are getting more value out of it than others, just so that we can start to figure out if there is a group that we should focus in on more than others, and see if we should start to narrow who our ICP is, or if it really is a universal problem that everybody needs to really be focused more on the customer insights and be more customer centric, and use that data to move forward.
Okay, got it. And then now can you also share a bit more about your role within the company, how it fits into the bigger picture?
Yeah, so I'm the founder and CEO. So, at our size company, that means everything from setting the vision and strategy to, taking out the garbage. But my primary role right now is really around a lot of customer outreach and really understanding, doing a lot of the customer understanding to help drive the vision, as well as we're starting a fundraising round. So talking to investors about our vision and helping them understand where we're going, and staying close to the product team to help drive product strategy.
Sounds like you're wearing a lot of, different hats. And then, yeah, you also mentioned a bit about fundraising. So maybe you could share more a bit as well, like what is your goal for the company, let's say within the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So we've done a small friends and family that's managed to bring us to market. So we're starting to onboard customers now, and started to convert those into paid customers. And we're not GA yet, so part of the fundraising is so that we can go generally available and make it where, someone could just go to our website and sign up right now. You can go to our website, express interest, and then we can onboard you. And we want to make that more scalable, so that people can just come in and sign up instead of needing to talk to one of us. And so really that's really the what the a big part of the fundraising is, to make it where people can just come on and sign up, and we have the support and success people to be able to bring on people at scale. And then the other piece is, right now our platform is really around that repository, around gathering data and storing it. And the next step that we want to do is the experimentation engine around that. Like, what do you do with that data? How can you use it to help you ideate and create hypotheses, and then run simulations against those hypotheses? And so that's the second piece of what we want to do with the money from investors, is to really help people come up with ideas and drive strategy with that data.
Okay, interesting. And then since we are on the same tangent of, you wanting to grow, maybe you could share more a bit as well about some of the challenges that you might face in terms of reaching these goals. To reach what you described earlier, basically of, better onboarding to
Yeah.
make the whole process more streamlined, faster as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say there's a couple of things. One, experientially, there's a couple of concepts in our platform that I wouldn't say are complex, but require an explanation. And so right now we're doing that very manually, like walking people through it to see what their questions are, so we can start to understand what explanation helps them understand it, and like what questions they have, so we can figure out then like how can we create a scalable system for that, so that, like, I feel like right now we don't know enough about what works and what doesn't, that we could automate that, where doing it by hand right now we can really see what the questions are, so then we can start to figure out what does that scalable system look like. And then I think the other thing is, we have this whole idea around a zero churn policy, which, doesn't mean that we think no one will ever churn, but what I don't want to be is one of those companies that says, oh, we'll have 5% churn. And so, at the end of the quarter, if we're like, oh, we only churned 4%, then like, okay, that's great. Like, I want to interrogate, like, if we lose a customer that we didn't want to lose, even if it's below some percentage point, I want to interrogate, like, what happened and why did we lose them? And right now we don't have the resources to do that. And so I'd want to make sure we had success teams that were setting teams up for success, as well as being able to do postmortems and understand, like, where did we fall flat? What could we have done to keep them? And then be able to make those changes. And right now we're just small. So we'd be if we scaled at a fast rate, we wouldn't be able to support that. And right now, so that's why we're keeping it a little bit smaller and growing at a slower rate, so that we have the personnel to support that and be able to really handhold customers and make sure that they are understanding the platform and getting the value out of it that they want and need.
Okay, so it's interesting because a lot of companies they might want to focus more on scaling that growth and acquiring new logos constantly. But whereas for you, you're more focused on trying to retain as much customers as you can right now and then bring the most amount of value to them for so that you can, for example, like you said, land and expand them in future as well. So it's an interesting approach. So what's been, working well, what's been not working as well when it comes to, strategies in trying to retain these customers?
Yeah, yeah. And one thing to be clear on that too, once we go generally available, like, we want to make sure we have that solid foundation for keeping customers. And then once we figure that out, then we want to really be able to scale the growth as well. But we want to make sure we know how to retain them first. And then in terms of any kind of challenges we have in retaining customers right now, I think probably honestly the big one is we're an early stage startup, and so there's still some experiential things and a few bugs that we have to, like, warn people about, to make sure that they know that it's on the roadmap to fix, but warning them so that they know before they hit it that it's something that they can expect. Just because, part of part of the catch of being an early stage startup, I think, is, I would love to fix them all, but we only have a certain number of developers, so we got to prioritize them and work our way down. Yeah, and then I think from there, just making sure that we have the resources to make sure we can help them get the most value out of the platform each and every day, making sure that they understand how they can use it and the different use cases that they can use it for, and making sure that they during that demo period that they're getting full value out of it.
Okay, interesting. And then you also mentioned that while you wanted to focus more on retaining in the early stage, ultimately you also of course want to, scale that growth and acquire more logos. So maybe you could share more as well as to what is your plan for doing that, as well as what are the key drivers of growth or channels that you rely on to drive growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, right now it's mostly inbound. We've been doing thought leadership, and so then they'll come to us, follow us on LinkedIn, and so then I'll offer to show them the platform, and that usually we either get feedback, and if they just give us feedback, that's great. As a startup founder, getting feedback is perfect. Oftentimes they turn into advocates, and either they'll start to introduce us to other folks. Maybe they're not the decision maker in an organization, but start to introduce us to their bosses, and we start working our way up that way. Or sometimes they end up being a decision maker, and they see it, and they're like, "This is something we could use," and then we get them in the pipeline. Obviously, that's not scalable. We can't do, like, once we need to really
Yeah,
start
yeah,
scaling, that's
that's
not going to be the thing. And so, we're looking into different ways of how we, can scale, while keeping a personal touch, but using as minimal a number of people as possible in terms of, leveraging AI to do a lot of that initial outreach with using artificial intelligence for a lot of the SDR type roles, while still really keeping in mind. So I think really naively throughout that idea of zero churn, which you think about like, oh, well, we need to make sure that we're serving the needs of the customer. But then when you start to think about it, it affects a whole lot of other things. Like you need to have your success group in place and making sure that they're getting maximum value out of the platform. But then you start thinking, if you start going back further and further, it influences how you hire and incentivize salespeople as well. Because, like, if you're incentivizing salespeople to pump up as many licenses as possible, like, you're going to get churn because they're going to
yeah.
they're going to oversell licenses, and even if you don't lose them as a customer, you're going to lose some of those licenses. So really starting to try to think about how do we bring on the right salespeople and the incentivize them in the right ways that they're incentivized for the long term versus short term. And so that's some stuff that we're thinking about right now.
Yeah, interesting. So it's not just about, trying to grow the company, but also about managing your internal employees and ensuring that they are aligned to the ultimate vision based on, the incentives given to them, the KPIs given to them to really try and follow this no churn policy. And that sort of affects the whole
Exactly.
company's culture as well.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the aspiration and hope. That's what we're driving for. Exactly.
Okay, makes sense. Now let's move on a bit to what are some of the broader industry trends that you are seeing. I know we touched a bit on AI. Maybe you could share more about like what are the specific use cases of AI within your organization or how it translates to more value for your customers as well, or any other industry trends that you want to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I can talk about that I think could be interesting for folks is, we think about, like, we're an AI first platform. Like, we're an AI platform for, like, the platform we're building is AI driven. And with that, a lot of what I'm trying to drive our organization to do is be thinking more about, like, how we can be internally, our operations be more AI driven. And so talking with the team a lot about thinking about how we can leverage AI in smart ways to scale more efficiently and be more capital efficient. So you, like, think then there's two layers we're thinking about AI. Like, we're thinking about AI strategically on our platform and then in our operations. And then me as a leader, I'm thinking about, like, well, how can I model the behavior I want for my team? So I'm always thinking about, like, how can I use AI as a leader to show, like, the behavior I want out of that. So, like, it's interesting when you start to think about it as a leader in an organization, especially an AI platform. Like, you kind of got to think about it on three levels of, like, I got to think about the strategy of my platform. I've got to think about the operations of my company, and I got to think about myself and make sure that I'm driving the right behavior. Like, I'm modeling the behaviors I want to see the leaders in my company. And so there's this, like, kind of three levels you really need to be thinking about AI and how it's getting utilized in your company. I think that's one thing that I would throw out there that I didn't really walking into this hadn't really thought about until we started trying to like do this. And it's like, oh, like I've got to like really parse out my thinking and really try to like separate out how I'm thinking about this in three different ways because it's very different. You know, when you're thinking about AI strategy in your platform, that's a very different thing than thinking about how the operations of your organization, and then that's separate than like what do I want to do? How do I personally want to leverage AI in my role to make sure that I'm modeling the behavior I want for my team? So that's one thing I see. I would say also we're primarily geared towards the product stack. Product managers, UX, marketing, kind of anything in that product stack is like the group that we're targeting. And I would say, you know, we've been at it for 2 years in terms of when we started really, when we started the company, you know, started early with some research and then started building maybe a little over a year ago. And then just in the last couple of months have been able to start to onboard some customers. And the acceptance and expectation of AI in that group of people has been so rapid and phenomenal. I've never seen anything quite like it. Where when we first started doing research with folks and talking to them about like what their expectations were and started to put some like prototypes in front of people, there was a lot of like, I don't want any of the AI in there. Don't use AI. I don't trust it. And like, you know, when we were like putting forth like how we were going to use AI and how, you know, we wanted it to be this human AI interface where humans were still in charge. And it was just this like resistance to AI, like just 2 years ago. And now like we're getting people like, well, can't AI just do this? Like we've been trying to like make it very much like human in charge, AI as the assistant and thought partner,
Yep.
and we're getting now more like people wanting more AI than we have in our platform. And so now we're having to like ramp up and add more AI. So it went from like having to kind of argue with people like, no, this is going to speed up your work while still leaving you in charge, to like within just a year and a half, 2 years, to them saying this isn't enough. And so I think that's like I've never seen a cultural shift in acceptance and trust and expectations that quick in something like this. So I think it's pretty interesting.
Okay. Yeah, that's certainly interesting for sure. And then you also brought up something about people's expectations on AI. They seem to be they want AI to do a lot more, but sometimes that may not be 100% realistic, right? So have you met such instances, and then if so, like how are you communicating the value of AI to your prospects in a much more realistic way?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, for us, there's this catch that we're trying to work with our customers to really understand with one of the value props that I think the roles that fit with this first app that we release is what the analysis app. It's like the intake of these customer insights. And it's like the insights people, outbound PMs, market researchers are the kind of people that would deal with this data. And I think for the longest time, part of their value proposition has been they know the data better than anybody else. Like they've sat with it, like they've had to like move the sticky notes around and really understand it and go through transcripts and understand the data better than anybody else. And so now when they're saying like, just have AI do this, like my question to them is like that, like one, you know, AI is probably not completely ready for that. And then two, like what is your value prop? Because AI knows the data now and you don't. Like you still need to kind of get into the data and really sink into it and understand it. And so we've taken out some of the busy work of it and tried to leave the part where you really get immersed in it and understand it. And so we're trying to really work with them to understand like where is it that they gain that understanding that they can still be that person that be like, oh, I know the data and understand it better than anybody else in the organization, but still getting rid of the busy work and helping them move
Mhm.
faster. And so that's kind of where I would say less about setting expectations. And so I switched the question on you a little bit. I apologize for that, but it's less about setting expectations and more about trying to understand the expectations and how we can work with that to create something that works for them and creates a tool that's useful and still keeps like what value they bring to the organization.
Okay. So it's ultimately about trying to understand what I guess the customer wants, the AI use cases of it, while also bringing it across as, not just replacing any sort of thing, but that they're still in charge, like what you said earlier about human AI interaction. They're still in charge of the overall task, but AI is just a tool to help them, augment their skill sets now.
Yeah, yeah. Because one of the things we're doing is like the human helps set up what we're calling like the contextual scaffolding to help AI figure out where things go. Because humans still understand more about like the politics of an organization, some of the stuff that like AI just would never know, so that
Yeah.
a human can set it up, and then that helps AI A know where things can go, and then B, there's just so much data that a human can never scale it that AI can do, and so like really trying to figure out how we can combine kind of the two superpowers of the human and the AI to get the best out of both.
Nice. That's great. Sounds like, you've had an incredible journey so far building Rutabaga and then, trying to impact as many teams as possible. Then what would you say, in order to really grow, what would you say is maybe the one thing that might be holding you back or slowing you down? And hypothetically, if you had like one magic wand to get rid of this one problem, what would that problem be?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing slowing us down most right now is resources because we're a small team with a million ideas, but there's only so much we can do with the resources we have. Um, and then I think the other probably the flip side of that, that's slowing us down and speeding us up, is just how rapidly the sands are changing underneath of us. It'll go from like we should be using this technology or these models to do this thing to the next week, like, oh, we need to switch it because this one just like
Yeah,
leapfrogged it. But on the same token, I mean, so that slows us down sometimes because we're like, well, we built that out and now we need to change it up because something has changed where we'll be behind the times we release this. But on the other flip side of that, I mean, there's times I go to my tech co-founder and I'll say, hey, I want to do this, and I'll lay out a scenario, and my tech co-founder will be like, well, that'll take me like years to build. Like that's impossible. We can't do it. And like 2 weeks later, he'll send me something, be like, hey, somebody just built this. I can build that out in a week now. So like all of a sudden it goes from like, there's no way to do it to a new technology comes out. There's like, we can do that now. So in some ways it slows us down, in other ways it speeds us up. But yeah, I think on the magic wand, we're in a fundraise, so if we can get that fundraise done, that'll really help us out a lot because that'll give us more resources to move faster. I think thinking in the AI space, I guess my magic wand in the AI space, we're building on top of graph technology. I think we saw like in my opinion, that first wave was like AI chatbots. Now we're seeing the agentic wave. And then I think the next wave that we're trying to get ahead of is both of those are creating a whole bunch of unstructured data, and graph is going to be that next wave of like being able to organize that data. And so we're trying to get ahead of that. And the tooling for graph is really poor right now. Like it's just bad tooling for graph databases. And so my magic wand would be for the graph database people to make better tooling so that we could work faster in that.
nice. And then you also touched on a point that sort of caught my interest. You mentioned about fundraising and how it can be really helpful for the business in terms of giving you more resources to, I guess, invest in growth. So, how are you, or rather, what are you currently doing in order to try and secure this fundraising faster?
Yeah, well, that's a big part of my job right now. I've been building relationships with investors over the last year or so, and now starting to call in meetings with them, and then also doing research on new investors. I'm down in San Diego, California, which for people that aren't familiar with U.S. geography is like the very southwest corner of the United States, like border of Mexico, Pacific Ocean. And most of the VCs are up in San Francisco, so I'm headed up there next week for a bunch of meetings with investors because that's where they are. So going to meet them where they're at. So yeah, really just I think recommendation would be if you're gonna raise, start building those relationships well before you need to raise, and start trying to build inroads before you need to start asking for money, so that they know who you are when you call, and then you get a better chance at getting those meetings.
Yeah, makes sense. So that's actually about it for the podcast interview, Dwayne. Once again, thank you so much for coming on board and for sharing these valuable insights to our audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.
Take care.